is happening right here. This is what all the fuss is about. You look at all these pictures around the room, there are all sorts of symbolic presentations of what's considered to be spiritually important or spiritually ultimate. And every single one of them is about nothing whatsoever other than this that is happening right here. I saw an interesting movie a couple of moments last night, I guess. This movie called One Track Heart, which is it's a documentary about Krishnadas, who was a follower of Maharaja, Nimkroli Baba, who's that guy over there in the picture. So that was around the corner, so when you're sitting you can't see it. And all these people in there, they're just completely following and oriented around Nimkroli Baba. And what made Nimkroli Baba what he was is this, right here. He recognized what this is, that's all. So why follow Nimkroli Baba when you can just follow this? Go to what he was following instead of following him around. It's like a big conga line. One person following another person following another. I'm following what he's following. I'm following him. Who's he following? Why not just look for yourself at what all the fuss is about? Okay. That's easy to do. That's why God gave us a mouse. There we go. What's happening here, what this is radically, drastically different than it's generally thought to be, than it's presented as being within human thought or human philosophy. What this is inconceivable, is astounding. And yet, it's quite obvious. If you approach it directly and look and see what it is in its own terms, as opposed to approaching it with pre-expectations that it's going to conform to this or that philosophy that you are used to subscribing to. This is challenging, largely because of the way our psychology works. Human psychology is very easily seduced into believing things, into belief systems. It's the basic principle by which hypnosis works, by which suggestion works. And it becomes very simple to hold certain things to be absolutely true, whether or not they are. And once you hold something to be true, you don't know that you're holding it to be true. You think it is true. And this is the mechanism that makes it so challenging and so difficult to notice directly what this clearly and obviously is. But by and large, people have been sold a bill of goods, have been sold on a consensus reality which is entirely inaccurate in every way. And because you're typically not aware that that's the case, you typically think that these things are just objectively true, not that they're notions that you've been brainwashed into. You don't question them, and you naturally see this in the context of those interpretations and those ideas. The actuality, which is so plain and simple and obvious, is thereby obscured because it's being seen in very baroque and twisted ways through the filtering of what one may be holding to be objectively true unconsciously. And again, since you don't know that you're holding these things in your imagination, in your mind, you don't know that you're supplying them, they're subjective. You think that it actually is like that. A typical example is that you are in a body. Another typical example is that there's an objective world that you're in, that your body is in. Another typical example is that there are that other people are basically like you are. Another typical example is that there's space and time and causality. I mean, all of these things are pretty obvious, and most people would say, "Well, what do you mean?" Of course, they would look at you funny if you said that there wasn't space, wasn't time, wasn't an objective world, you weren't in your body. They'd think you're a wacko, or you lived in California or something. And yet, in actuality, none of those things are true. What is true is very clear and obvious, very, very simple. It's very plain to see. And there exists an infinite field of experience. And all of reality appears within that field. And you are the observer of that field. This is self-evident. Every small child knows it until they've been brainwashed. And that's about it, really. The interesting thing about this field is that it exists in infinite nothingness, essentially, infinite transcendence, infinite undescribability, supported by nothing. It's sitting on nothing. Your experience is like a bubble that's floating in what? In what's holding it up? What's it sitting on? Just here it is. Not sitting on it, just floating right here. And what's doing it? Where's it coming from? Where's all of this stuff showing up from? Just poof, here it is. It's like magic, a magic show. Just instantaneously everything appears, everything shines forth for this instant. And completely gone forever. But most people will look at that and say, yeah, sure, that's happening. And I'm in my body, and I'm in the world, and we're sitting here in open secret, and it's Tuesday, and it's blah, 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 blah. There's no true frame of reference on this presence that is your experience. It's just here. There's no measuring stick, there's no map, there's no way of calibrating it in relation to anything else. There's no anything else to calibrate it to anyway. It's just this bubble of your experience, and everything that shows up in it, doesn't it? I mean, I'm just a pattern within the field of your vision. My words are just sounds showing up in your field of hearing. That's all they are. Nothing else. And when you come to really see accurately and clearly the truth of that, and the comprehensiveness of this fact, of this condition, it has some very powerful implications, some very powerful repercussions, which frees you from human suffering, essentially, frees you from any sense of limitation, any sense of dependency, any sense of lack, any sense of incompleteness, any sense of unfulfillment. Very directly and inclusively, just because of what this is, because of what this actually happens to be. So I'm kind of relaxed tonight. That's the relaxed version. If you'd like, we can talk about anything that occurs to you. Explore anything that seems interesting to you. Michael.
Before I get to my main question, this reminds me of anybody here is the original Planet of the Apes.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And the final scene at the end where the Charlton Heston character sees the Statue of Liberty and says, "My God, I was here all along." It radiates always been here.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you, this is an area of discussion that's not often addressed in contemporary spiritual, by contemporary spiritual teachers, but the whole world of spirit influence and entities and what we call the demonic or dark side.
Sure.
I take it that has relative existence.
Well, nothing has relative existence. It has absolute existence, as it does, which is as qualities of energy. You know, what I call the radiance, which is the full field of energies that show up as experiential characteristics or experiential qualities, is an infinite field of a presentation of infinite characteristics. And many of these characteristics can be characterized or qualified in all sorts of different ways, including as thought, as obviously a sense experience, but also as psychic phenomena, discarnate vibes, flavors of energy that don't seem to have any sort of a physical correlate, and yet have qualities, all sorts of qualities, in a full range of qualities, many of which are qualifiable as positive or negative or angelic or demonic or what have you. But all of that qualification is very heavy-handed and depends upon imposing some kind of a framework of assessment, which doesn't really intrinsic, because all qualities are qualities of the radiance, so are essentially transcendental. Many of the qualities, most of the qualities are essentially beyond the human framework. In other words, they don't make much sense within the human scale of things. And many of these flavors of not making sense could be classified as demonic or, so on and so forth. But again, these ways of classifying it are heavy-handed and arbitrary and depend upon some kind of a framework that justifies that qualification. For example, qualifying things as discarnate entities or spirits or angels or deities or saints or what have you, is all based on some kind of a scale of physicality versus non-physicality, which is of course it turns out is quite arbitrary. There's all sorts of degrees of apparent coherence in the radiance. Some aspects of the radiance seem to have a relatively high degree of stability and seem to have a relative strong sense of experiential presence. Other aspects of the radiance are very, very fleeting and delicate and flighty and essentially relatively insubstantial seeming in their flavor, in their textural, in their experiential texture, and this corresponds to all these kinds of classifications that can be made.
Are they sentient beings in a way that we would understand?
There's no such thing as sentient beings. There's only one sentient being, and within that sentient being, which is the field of your experience, all sorts of qualities appear. And the qualities only have existence because they exist within the field of your sentience. They aren't sentient. Nothing is sentient but you. There's only one sentience. There's no sub-sentiences. So there can be there can be projected sentiences, hypothetical sentences. Like you can hypothesize that maybe I'm sentient in the way that you're sentient, and so that in that case I would be the sentience in a universal field of radiance that was appearing as an infinite spectrum of experiential characteristics, just like you are. But you can only hypothesize that. You can't know that. As far as you know, there's only one sentience. So there is sentient being, and then everything appears within that sentient being. And the sentient being is not related to a body or a form or a karmic rule or anything. The sentient being is that in which all apparent karmas appear, all apparent patternings of the radiance appear and disappear.
From the point of view of my apparent subjectivity, everything else is just a, what do you call it? It's a projected thing. It's
an apparition.
Yeah, it's an inferred thingness or qualitative.
Yeah, well, there may or may not be inference going on in terms of guessing what it is, but as it appears, all you can say is it's an apparition.
I was thinking an imputation.
Right. Yeah, you may have all sorts of imputations about the apparitions, just like you might in a dream. In a dream, you might see what looks like a person walking up to you, and you might project that they're a person, and you might have a conversation with them, and you might have the feeling that you're talking to another being.
I pondered this for such a long time. I have such a tough time with the dream analogy, because in the dream situation, it's obvious that it's merely an imaginary concept.
In what sense is it obvious?
If I wake up and I remember having a dream about a pink elephant in a different planet, whatever, that was just something that this mind spun out from whatever data, whatever its origin.
But you don't know that the mind spun it out. That's another theory that you project. All you know is it was appearing, and now it's not.
Right.
And once you go to sleep, this was appearing, and then it's not. And then you start dreaming, and that's appearing. So the radiance looks the way it looks at any given moment, and that's the only thing you can say. And then theories about whether or not it's psychological, whether or not the mind's doing it, whether or not it's based on biochemistry in the brain, whether or not the waking state is the prime state and these other states are substates of that, are all theories. They're all just theories, and the theories are projections. They're hypotheses. They're not certainties.
The dream state seems to be occurring within the subjective field of imagination.
But how can you say that? How is that different than this?
There's no carryover into the waking state.
But there's no carryover of the waking state into the deep sleep state or into the dream state. They're different.
So the teachings on interdependent origination, that everything arises from causes and conditions, obviously that pertains to what the Buddha was addressing, the waking reality, that things.
I think that the chain of interdependent origination is taken wrong. I think that the point of that theory, or the point of that philosophy, is to show that any and all phenomena exist in the context of all other phenomena. Mm-hmm. Nothing exists independently. Mm-hmm. Right. I think that's the important aspect of that teaching, rather than the specifics of it. So, in that context, any experience per se is embedded within and interrelated with all experience. I think that's the fundamental point of this. And this is not and there are no, first of all, there are no separable conditions that could have origination. Nothing is originated, so there is no actual origination. You know, anything that is an entity is an assertion. There are no entities. I mean, this is the whole entire basis. You know, if you want to look at Buddhism, it's the basis of Buddhism. Anatta, all dharmas are void of self-nature, which means that there are no things. Things are arbitrary groupings of experiential characteristics, i.e. of radiance, which are not intrinsically unified.
No, it's referring, okay, the chain, the teaching on the chain of interdependent origination is referring to the way things appear, rather than an ultimate status. The ultimate status is radiance.
Yeah.
Their appearance is defined by apparent causes and conditions.
Right, and the first cause in the chain is ignorance, which means interpreting the radiance as being anything whatsoever. So as soon as that cat's out of the bag, all bets are off. I mean, as soon as you start interpreting this, it's like in a dream. A dream is nothing whatsoever, right? There's nothing there. It's just woo. It's just pure, whatever, pure light, pure experience, pure dream, pure sleep. And yet you start interpreting, oh no, this looks like an environment, this looks like objects, and this looks like bodies, and this looks like action, and this looks like cause and effect, and this looks like a chain of events. So as soon as you start interpreting it all, you're screwed. I mean, you've departed from the actuality, and you've laid the groundwork for all sorts of projections and hypotheses, which are just plain inaccurate.
So that's why a Sherpa type of teacher can say there's never been, essentially, there's never been phenomena. There's never been.
Yeah, because all of those are heavy-handed over-interpretations of what is, which is entirely transcendental and cannot be said, cannot be described in any terms whatsoever. Even my terms of calling it radiant presence is too heavy-handed, but as descriptions go, it's fairly open-ended. It's important to keep in perspective that actuality is entirely beyond analysis, entirely beyond description, entirely beyond explanation. So anything whatsoever that seems like it can be referred to in any way, or have theories about it in any way, or you know, anything whatsoever positive about it is a sure sign that you've departed from actuality and you're in basically ignorance. You're in heavy-handed misinterpretation. Well, any interpretation is misinterpretation, and any interpretation is too heavy-handed in the sense that it departs from the actual condition as it is. And the actual condition as it is just this, it's right here. It's the interpretations that are the problem. When you don't interpret this, what is it?
Me and Dick were driving over the SanRafael Bridge, and I looked up at the sky, and there was a cloud there, and the clouds seemed to be made out of consciousness, and the atmosphere around it seemed to be made out of consciousness, and the bridge seemed to be made out of consciousness, but I wasn't really sure.
Well, there is consciousness, and to the extent that there is, and so certainly anything that appears in consciousness is that. I mean, you know.
So it's appearing in my consciousness.
Of course. When you see the cloud, you only see it because it's appearing in your consciousness. So of course it is evidence of your consciousness, so of course you're seeing consciousness when you see the cloud. And the cloud is made of consciousness in the sense that if there was no consciousness, there'd be no cloud.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like it was made out of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, what consciousness is made of and what the apparition is made of is one and the same thing. You know, we usually have a model where there's some subjective consciousness or knower or looker somewhere over here or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's something being seen somewhere out here, right? And that's and that this is different than that. This is different than that. Mm-hmm. But if you look very closely, it's not like that. What is seeing, the principle that observes experience is where? It's with experience. The principle that's being observed as experience is where? It's with experience. Mm-hmm. When you see me, the consciousness of seeing me is right here with me. Mm-hmm. It's not localized. It's not like there's some space between your it's not like your consciousness is over there somewhere and my appearance is over here somewhere and there's some big bridge that happens or something, right? It's like if you feel a sensation, you feel it where? In your consciousness. If you see something and you feel the vision, you're seeing it where? In your consciousness. Or you wouldn't see it. Mm-hmm. So, since your consciousness is here, and what you're seeing is here, why suppose they're two different things? Why not just suppose it's an appearing? It's a presence. You know, we have. If you look closely, consciousness is a theory. You can't find consciousness. You can't hold it. You can't point to it. You can't touch it and say, "This is consciousness over here," and it's clearly different than this that's appearing that's over there. You can't do that, right? Because consciousness is just a name for the power, the potency, the ability of things to be perceived. But maybe things just can be perceived, and so so the consciousness is in what's being perceived, and what's being perceived is in the consciousness, and they're one and the same thing. In other words, it's a complicated, abstract theory to hold that they're two different things when it's never actually been found. It's just another one of these ideas. It's just assumed to be true.
So they say non-duality is not two.
Yeah.
Get it a little bit.
I mean, again, just look for yourself. It's easy to suppose because you used to think, oh, there's consciousness. My consciousness is seeing my experience. Because verbally it could be put that way. I mean, a lot of this is due to artifacts of language. Because we have a word for something, the assumption is there's actually something there. So consciousness is seeing experience. So therefore that implies, according to the verbal logic, that there is consciousness and there is experience. But that's just the structure of language. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Maybe the language is wrong. This is your experience is one phenomena. And if there is consciousness, it is your experience. And if there is what is being perceived, it is your experience. I mean, again, think of a dream. What's being seen in a dream, once you wake up and you look back on it, it was clearly consciousness. Because it was not like there was things being manufactured off stage and being put in stage to be moved around in your dream. It was just proof. It just appears in your consciousness effortlessly. And you can't know that you're not dreaming now. You can't know that this condition is any different than the condition that happens when you dream. A dream appears, and then it seems to be real, and you're in it, and it's true, and then it disappears. And then you wake up, it disappears. And it seems to be true and real, and you seem to be in it, till you go to sleep, and it disappears. And then a dream appears, and you seem to be in it, and it seems to be true and real, until it disappears. And then you wake up, disappears, it seems to be true and real, you seem to be in it. Dreams can be just as seemingly true and seemingly real as this experience. By just feeling this as itself without qualifying it whatsoever as consciousness, even as experience, just this, just feeling it, feel what its texture is, it communicates itself, it reveals itself non-linearly, non-conceptually, and a great deal can be learned about this just by feeling its presence. You won't be able to say what it is, you won't even be able to think what it is, but nonetheless you can and will learn it because there is intelligence present. This is intelligence, and there is intelligence there is intelligence present, there's meaningfulness present, and this meaningfulness manifests, it demonstrates itself, it reveals itself.
Peter, ego structure has great intelligence also.
Well, ego structure is an artifact of the prime intelligence. It doesn't have any intelligence. Ego structure is a construction or an artifact of intelligence. It's a projection.
In the projected condition, it's designed or disposed toward perpetuating itself.
Yes, but there's no actual projected condition. There's an apparent projected condition, which is actually just an interpretation of the actual condition. The actual condition is the only condition, the sole condition. There's no actual condition of delusion. The condition of delusion is just a misinterpretation which exists within and consists of nothing but the actual condition. There's no secondary condition created. And so the ego structure is just an assertion, an imaginary, hypothetical framework of interpretation that exists within and is nothing whatsoever other than the actual condition. So reality never departs, and unreality never actually shows up. It's just held to show up in the imagination through projection. And the ego and all these various other things are this kind of an imaginary framework of interpretations which has no actual existence. Its only field of existence is the field of actual existence, which is reality itself.
So the interpretation, which I'm understanding more and more, labeling things.
Yeah.
That doesn't in any way change the actuality.
Exactly.
Radiance.
Exactly. It doesn't change it. It doesn't add to it. It doesn't depart from it. It's just assertions made about it. But because of the nature of the intelligence, it's possible for these assertions to be held, to be believed in, essentially, to be held powerfully to be true, at which point they seemingly, magically seem to be objectively true. To the point that one can forget what is actually true and be seeing only the self-fulfilling prophecy of these believed in frameworks of projection, which have actually no existence whatsoever. It's very strange.
The interpretive mind and the pure mind or non-interpretive mind, same experience.
Yeah.
Just seeing one is through a filter or.
Yeah. Exactly so. And it's not it's not even an actual filter. It's being seen directly. But nonetheless it's being interpreted. And the interpretation becomes self-fulfilling to the extent it's believed in. Even though nothing's there. It's very strange that this can happen.
So without that, everything becomes fake. Everything has a nature.
Yeah.
Every appearance is not other.
Yeah, because it never is not that, but it just clearly can be seen as that. The only thing that prevents it from being seen as that is imagining it to be other than that. But that imagination doesn't actually create any otherness. It seems to recast reality in the light of what's being imagined, but in actuality nothing's being recast. Only actuality is ever being seen. Anything that you experience is 100% real. But it's not what you think it is. If you think it's anything, you're wrong. Because what it actually is cannot be thought.
Peter, I've never heard the ego described like that. That is so magnificent because it actually, it does. It's like it's an inherent intelligence of the thing, but it doesn't really exist.
No, it doesn't exist at all. It's all smug. It's an assertion. It's another, no misinterpretation actually exists, no matter how much it can seem to. It does not actually exist. It's like when you see someone who's been brainwashed, they're in a cult or something, and then they're, it's like one of these don't drink the Kool-Aid kind of situations. They're seeing these things as if they're actually true, and nothing has changed, and yet for these people this is like, oh no, but this guy's God, and he says drink the Kool-Aid, They're seeing him. He's not any more or less God than he ever was, but somehow they can convincingly and entirely objectively, without even questioning it, just, this guy's God. He says to drink the Kool-Aid, so we got to drink the Kool-Aid. And it's bizarre how that happens.
Well,
there's nothing whatsoever actually there, and yet it can seem to be actual. But this is a mechanism. This is a mechanism. Essentially, it's a mechanism of hypnosis.
Yeah.
All beliefs, anything that you've ever believed about anything you believe about anything now is basically hypnosis. And the insidious nature of this is typically you're not, when you hold these beliefs, you're not aware that they're beliefs, and you're not aware they're hypnotic. You think they're true. Which is why this mechanism is so insidious. That's why it is pointless to get into political arguments with people, because everyone knows they're right.
Yes.
Conservatives know they're right. Liberals know they're right. Communists know they're right. Christians know they're right. Buddhists know they're right. And they know it because they have taken these ideas and put them in a position of holding them to be objectively true. And so it can't be looked at, it can't be analyzed rationally, because it's no longer in a realm of rationality. It's just, if you say anything other than what they hold to be true, you're obviously nuts or stupid or misled, misguided. It's like go to any fundamentalist. You go to a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist Islamic or a fundamentalist anything, and they're looking at you thinking, poor soul, you don't know, you're ignorant, you just don't have a clue, you don't know the truth. Because to a person in that condition, what they're holding to be true, they aren't aware that it's an idea. They think that it's objectively the case. And more generally speaking, an example of a more general belief, which is nothing other than a belief, which is not objectively true, is that there's an objective world. Most people would look at you like you're nuts if you came up to them and told them there's no objective world. The objective world is just a theory. They go, what do you Men in white are coming to take you away. And yet, this is a perfect example of something that most people simply believe to be objectively true. Then there's virtually no evidence for it. It's a hypothesis. It's a viable hypothesis of many, but it's not. There's only one objective truth, and that is the fact of your experience. But what it is and how it is and anything about it whatsoever is interpretation, i.e. a theory, a hypothesis, a possibility. It could be that you're in the body. It could be that you're in an objective world. It could be that you were born and you're going to die. But all those are just theories. The fact is this. And it cannot be said what this is. And if you look in this, you can't find time. You can't find space. You can't find being in or out of any bodies. You can't find any of these things in actuality. Because experience does not actually conform to those ways of holding it to be.
Peter?
Yeah.
In classical early Buddhists and Theravada tradition, they describe the jhana states. Have you heard of those? The formless absorptions.
I don't recall. I probably saw them at one point.
The first four are based on the so-called Brahma Viharas, having to do with positive mental states of loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And the four formless ones are infinite space, infinite consciousness, no thing, and then neither perception or non-perception. Very subtle. It's been explained to me they're abstractions. They're very, very refined meditations on subtle ideation. And they're said to correspond to at least the last four to dimensions of being that one can be reborn in, which are refined, very, very quiescent states of existence. The fourth one is considered the peak of samsara. That's as good as it can get within cyclic existence.
But all of those qualifications are simply included as ways of seeing or being with this. So this already includes all of those inherently, spontaneously, and this transcends all of those too. So it's again it's a case of too much specification, too much qualification.
Well, I wrote that up. I wanted to ask. It would not be necessary to cultivate those.
No. Because again they're included. I mean, in as you know in Dzogchen, it's said in Dzogchen the only thing you need, you don't need to cultivate anything, just be with actuality, and everything that could be cultivated is what comes with, is included in that.
It's the same for the paramitas and so forth?
Everything. Because anything that could exist is just a qualification or an abstraction of this actuality. Nothing is added to this through cultivation. It's more a matter of shifting your focusing and shifting your filtering. And if you just don't have any filtering, you get the whole deal. It's inclusive with no exclusivity. You get all of samsara, you get all of nirvana, you get all the various states, you get all the heavens and all the hells and everything. Bang! It's just those are all just ways of overqualifying this, and this includes and transcends all of them. Just this actuality that is right here, just this. It's not some transcendental version of this or something. It's just this simple. What is already the case is what all the fuss is about. This is the three kayas.
Yeah, my question is, these. Heard several invited teachers say that. Who's looking through your eyes, and the inference is that Source is looking through your eyes.
Sure.
What about that one?
What about it?
And it's looking through its eyes and seeing itself. Source is seeing itself.
Right. But look for yourself and see. I mean, the whole idea of Source implies as compared to what? Is there some non-source? Is there some other? If Source is Source, then how is that meaningful? What's that meaningful in relation to?
Yeah.
Again, it's a way of trying to over-glorify some particular principle or something, but no particular principle that's differentiable from anything else can be found, right? Because this is inclusive. This is everything. What's seeing through your eyes is right here. Always has been, always will be. No biggie. What's being seen is right here. You want to call it Source? No problem. I don't have a problem with that. You want to call it God? I don't have a problem with that. You want to call it consciousness, doesn't matter. But what you call it doesn't change what it is. And it always is what it is. Before someone called it Source, it was still whatever it is. And calling it Source doesn't improve it or make it better or make it more special or make it more spiritual, or for that matter, less. as humans, the normal human mode is qualifying, classifying, and we're typically drunk with it. We spend all our time doing it. In the normal human mode exchange is chatting with each other, is just exchanging classifications. And all of this classifying can't actually touch or include what's supposedly being classified. What's supposedly being classified, i.e. this actual field of present experience, completely transcends any and all qualifications you can come up with, any and all classifications. You couldn't possibly come up with sophisticated enough words that could accurately describe this, or accurately. It just can't be done. So all of this qualifying, and even in spiritual circles, it's more of the same qualifying. Oh, this is holy, this is sacred, this is the divine, this is that. Yeah, great, okay. But, it's just more classifications, and here it is, and this is beyond classification. It's the real thing. What is it? Well, you can't say what it is. But you don't need to say, because here it is, you got it. It never goes away. You can't get rid of it if you wanted to. It doesn't have any off switch. And it itself is a whole lot better than the most elaborate, sophisticated, glorified classifications you can come up with. It's better than that. It's infinitely better than the best qualifications you can come up with of it. You can come up with the most elaborately glorified theories and explanations and descriptions of it, and they will pale before the actuality. And you have the actuality, so why spend your time dabbling around with these little pale imitators? Well,
this is hard to talk about this. But could you say something about apparent senses? 5, 6, 7, who knows how many? When it's referred to awakening or aliveness, as if the senses become alive.
Right. The senses don't become alive, but you recognize and notice how alive they have always been. Your all experience whatsoever is absolutely dynamic. Absolutely just there is no stasis whatsoever in experience. Experience is continually moving and continually surprising, completely unpredictable, completely creative. Every instant you experience something you've never experienced before and are never going to experience again. And every instant is completely unpredictable. You could not in any way have known the smallest piece of what you're experiencing any time. You could not have known that was going to happen. You could not have predicted it. So when you see that, that's simple. It's just like that. That's the truth. That's just how it is. And it's obvious that it's that way. And when you begin to appreciate experience as it is, when you begin to unfold to the actuality of experience as it is, outside of classification, then you notice this liveliness, this amazing dance of spontaneity, and it is profound and it's meaningful because it all embodies intelligence and infinite implications and infinite innuendo and infinite subtlety and dimensionality. It's not just inert. Everything, all experience is not mechanical. It's not dead. It's all a profound engagement with absolute intelligence, with absolute meaningfulness, with astounding, infinite ranges of cross correspondence. I mean, just incredible, endless profundity. And all of this, it is that. So it's plain to, it's easy to see all of this if you care to take the time to notice it. And this is what this is. You can't not be that. You can't make it not that. The closest you can come to making it not that is come to believe that it isn't that, and then even though you're actually seeing that, you don't recognize it consciously. But even that doesn't stop it. Doesn't change it. You cannot change this. You cannot taint this. You can't make this any worse than it is. It can't be done. All you can do is imagine that you have. Oh, this is just boring. This is just stupid. This is pointless. It's dull life. God, it's so boring and doesn't go anywhere, and nothing ever gets achieved. And what a disaster. Oh shit. I mean, you can do that, right? But what's the point? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make it so. It can seem to make it so, but it doesn't really.
So why do they say that you are not your senses?
Because you in one sense you are your senses. You are every portion of your experience, but you're not limited to any portion of your experiences. So if you add up your senses, like the sense fields, you add up, vision and hearing and touch and smell and taste and thought and any other fields you want to put in. However many of those fields you add up, there's always more, infinitely more, that you are also. So you are your senses, but you're so much more than that you're not limited to your senses. You are every portion of your experience, but you're more, because experience is infinite. It has no end. It has no edge. However much you find that you are in your experience, there's more. And if you include that, there's more than that. If you include that, there's more than that. Forever.
Is it that they say don't, senses turn outwards and then in and then they...
Really?
All this in and out is just too much hypothesizing. There's no such thing as in and out. Senses are here. Where's in? Where's out? Light is here. Light is an experience. Where's the in? Where's the out?
I'm just saying the scriptures.
No, I understand. But, people have theories about identifying with circumstances versus identifying with transcendence and all that. But even that's too heavy-handed, because circumstances are transcendent. And transcendence is circumstances. Everything is the same. Everything is, there's one thing going on here, and every aspect of it, every level of density of it is the same thing working in the same way, even if it looks radically different. Thought is the same thing that vision is the same thing that hearing is the same thing that subtle vibes are, is the same thing that absolutely transcendental radiance is, and blah, blah, blah. They're just all different words for aspects of the same thing that are in no way different from each other.
So aspects of the same thing is the unification then?
Well, it's no unification because it just is intrinsically one. Thank you very much. It does nothing to be unified, it already is.
Know that.
Yeah.
It's the diamond of...
Yeah. Yeah, but this is, this includes itself. And if you want to see what's here, you can just spend the rest of eternity finding different aspects of this and that, and there's so much you can find because it's infinite. You can always find more. So that's, oh, look at that, I didn't think of that, there's that here too. Oh, look, there's that. You can do that forever.
Oh, it's absolutely infinite.
Yeah,
sound.
but it's all, but it's
hear the sound. It's infinite.
Yeah, but it's intrinsically unified. It's already one thing. You don't need to add anything. You don't need to group it together. It's already. It's this. It's this. It includes itself. It's inclusive. It's not separated from itself. It's subtle and it can be confusing if you try and sort it out, because this is infinitely differentiated. And that's a whole lot of differentiation. It's differentiated forever. Anywhere you look in your experience, you will find it'll appear to be different than anywhere else you look in your experience. Absolutely. I mean, and that's a very strong statement if you follow it, if you do the math. And yet, anywhere you look in your experience includes anywhere else you would look in your experience. So even though it's infinitely differentiated, it never departs from itself. It's all one thing, but it's infinitely differentiated. So it's all one thing, but it's not coherent. It doesn't come together. It doesn't reduce. So it's a very strange kind of thing that's here. It's a very strange entity. It's a very strange condition because it's a inconceivable infinity, and yet it's just one thing. And that's that's unthinkable. You can't think of it, but you don't need to think of it because there it is. It is that. You don't need to be able to conceive of it because you have it. You are it. And you can notice it and play with it and explore it as much or as little as you want, and you won't actually gain anything from the exploration, and you won't lose anything from not exploring it, because it is what it is, and you are it, and you have it completely already, forever, for all time.
I was at this very small Buddhist group in the East Bay, and this guy actually wrote a book on the samadhi.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about equanimity, and he says that he remembers at a time when he first started meditating that he did get mad at something, I forget what it was. And so I, in questions and answers, I said, well, if you got mad at this, whatever it was, that was in that instance, it was the will of God. And he said, oh no, it wasn't the will of God or something, wasn't it? I said,
anything that happens,
mm-hmm.
all you can say about it is that it appears to be that way, whatever that was,
mm-hmm.
and you can't force it. You can't sort it out. Why? You can't separate the will of God from anything else. I mean, in other words, things happen essentially miraculously or mysteriously,
mm-hmm.
and so there's no basis for differentiating things happening for one cause and then other things happening for a different cause.
Mm-hmm. But he says he doesn't get mad anymore, and he said, what's your background? Is it a Veda, something like that, Vedanta, Ayurveda, or whatever it is. Yeah, and he's, he doesn't think that way at all.
It doesn't matter, but again, how you think is not reality. How you think is just a pattern of thought,
mm-hmm.
and no pattern of thought, no matter how sophisticated, no matter how ingenious, can ever capture this actuality, because this is beyond capturing. It's beyond abstracting.
Yeah. But is there any framework where you could say it was the will of God that when he was mad, it was
everything's the will of God?
Okay, all right.
If you want to say what does it, I mean,
mm-hmm.
the real question is, why does anything appear? And that question is unanswerable. But there's certainly no basis for differentiating that this appears for an unknown reason that's fundamentally different from the unknown reason that this appears as. So I get mad, there's no reason for qualifying that as a different basis of apparition than the fact that the sun appears in the sky in the morning.
Mm.
I mean, the sun shows up mysteriously, and I don't know why it's there. I don't know what's putting it there, why it's showing up. Anger shows up, I don't know why it's there. My thought shows up, I don't know why it's there. What puts it there, But every aspect of experience is the same, shows up the same way. What's doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What is this right here? What's doing it?
And so it's all a mystery?
It's all a mystery. So if you want to translate that into will of God, that's fine. That's fine. It's just a good way to put it as that. I mean, the nice thing about invoking God as the cause of it all is that it's totally irrational, makes no sense. I mean, it stops bullshit pseudo explanations right in their tracks, because it's like, hey, if God did it, Oh, okay. What are you going to do with that? You're going to sort that out? Why did God do it? Well,
You get out with a big kahuna. See what you get with that.
I mean, that's the nice thing about theism, is it's just sort of, it's like science. It's like, well, why do things happen? Because the laws of physics are the way they are. The four fundamental forces behave the way they do. Okay, cool. Why is that? Well, because of the way the Big Bang was. Why is that? And then they step off a cliff, and you want to say will of God? Works for me. And then the law, everything happens because of the laws of physics, and the laws of physics happen because of the will of God. Okay, cool.
Peter, mainstream Christians who believe in very concrete terms in a Father and Jesus and all that, and live varies, but generally people of that faith live with a sense of trust in that and devotion.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's basically bhakti yoga.
Maybe so. But anything that you qualify other than simply noticing the actuality of this is some degree of overinterpretation. So even bhakti yoga is an over degree of interpretation. Physical science is over-interpretation.
Would it in time, can it in time transcend itself?
Anything, yeah. Interpretation can always be transcended, but not in terms of the interpretation. The interpretation is transcended by seeing it as partial, by seeing it as inevitably partial. In other words, by seeing that the actuality is beyond interpretation.
You mentioned in your presentation on yoga months ago that all yogas eventually funnel into what you call the yoga of radiant presence.
Yeah.
Would that occur in some organic, natural manner, let's say, if minds of a Christian or a Hindu would?
Well, it may or may not, but it's not down to a formula of the practice. It's down to the individual intelligence or the individual insightfulness of the individual. Yoga is basically a pretense, and yoga becomes genuine yoga when it turns to noticing the actuality of the experience as it is. And yoga may or may not at any point turn to that, but it's not down to the formula of the practice, it's down to the insight of the practitioner. And it doesn't have to be yoga, it can be anything. I mean, anyone can, a person can be a bank robber or a torturer professionally and can come to realization by seeing the actuality of their experience and noticing what it actually is, and then discovering that it transcends interpretations.
It seems these psychopaths can reify the interpretation of solidity.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, this is always the case. In any interpretive framework, you can go two ways. You can go further into reifying it, or you can go into discovering its inadequacy and transcend it. And again, this is not down to the formula of the structure, it's down to the individual intelligence and insightfulness. I mean, even some of the most exalted and relatively transparent frameworks of philosophy, like Dzogchen and things like this, are amenable to reification and misinterpretation and building a prison out of. Because again, it's not a matter of the form; it's a matter of how the person is taking the form. Whether the form is being used as a framework for belief, i.e. delusion, or whether the form is just a jumping off point to discover the actuality that transcends the form and that the form actually refers to.
When you say transcending interpretation, you mean like realizing that you can't explain anything by any other way, or by even using different metaphors or anything like that?
Yeah, it's beyond it. It's uninterpretable. You could write an encyclopedia about the smallest experience, and it would not be the same as the experience. The map can never capture the terrain. It's a very simplistic way of putting that. It can be a very highly detailed map, but the terrain will absolutely transcend the map.
And how you explain it in some different way is sort of basically irrelevant, except you might have fun doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it may be relevant if you use it as a jumping off point to the actuality, but it may be dangerously irrelevant if you cling to it and relate to the actuality through the interpretation, which technically can be called reifying it. In other words, holding it to be real, holding it to be true. And this is the way, I mean, in terms of spirituality, in terms of the spiritual dilemma, it all gets down to this. It gets down to delusion, i.e. reifying misinterpretations of actuality, which will always be relatively limiting, versus being with the actuality itself as it is, which will always be relatively freeing and liberating, because the actuality transcends your interpretation. Your interpretation was going to be a diminished version of the actuality, so you're getting less, you're making it smaller, you're making it more limited. And if you think you inhabit that world, then you'll be thinking of yourself inhabiting a limited, small world relative to the actuality. So you're shooting yourself in the foot, you're cutting yourself off from enjoying a greater fullness.
And the greater fullness is realizing and seeing that things are as they are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fortunately, it happens that this is infinite. This is infinite. It's dynamic. It's astounding. It's inconceivable. There's no way this could be boring. There's no way this could be dull. There's no way this could not be unexciting. There's no way this could feel constraining, because it's endlessly open-ended and it's endlessly new. It's hard to make stuckness out of endless newness. So you have to. So to manufacture stuckness, you have to do it. You have to create it in your imagination, and then somehow convince yourself that it's true. Start believing it, which is exactly what happens with people, in this spiritual situation of feeling. I feel like my life doesn't have any point. I feel stuck. I feel like disconnected. But you're disconnected from what? Here's everything. Where's the wall? Where's the moat? Where's the gap? Where's the chasm? No, I'm disconnected. I'm cut off. But it's a fantasy of being cut off. This cut offness is manufactured. This littleness is manufactured. This nothingness is manufactured. And then through the quirks of psychology, through the quirks of this bizarre mechanism of autosuggestion or suggestion in general, these ideas are held to be objectively true, and we forget that they're just ideas or hypotheses. We think, no, things are like that. This is a stuck world. This world does suck. This world is limited. This world is stupid. This world is boring. This world is blah, blah, blah. And when one just sees the world as that, in the face, astoundingly, in the face of the obvious fact that none of that's actually the case. It's strange. I mean, it's the perversity of psychology, really.
Peter, I know a number of people who are Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are very, very sweet and very, a sense of almost childlike faith in Jesus.
Uh-huh.
And of course, that's not my interpretation of reality. I'm more into what you're pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if it seems intuitively appropriate to share, say, with those people, my perspective, in an attempt to have something to transcend what could be a limited perspective.
You can always try, but in my experience, people can't see something unless they want to or they're ready to.
Mm-hmm, right.
You can't force feed.
Right.
Which is why proselytizing doesn't work. And strategically, the best way to approach something like that is to put what you want to show them in their terms, so they have a jumping off point, so that you can then bridge the way in which what they're seeing as the way they're seeing it could be seen in another way, without actually being fundamentally different.
In John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Sure.
That's in a nutshell.
Radiant presence.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The Word is the radiance.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, all profound mystical traditions and spiritual traditions very clearly talk about this, because it's true. It's fundamentally true. And all radical spiritual traditions incorporate that, even if they incorporate a lot of relative stuff that are unnecessary and erroneous elaborations built on that.
And the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, I'm Jewish by birth, but my parents were culturally Jewish, but not things. But later on, I studied the Kabbalah a little bit. The Ein Sof, in Hebrew, the endless light.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, all this, all. If you look closely, all spiritual traditions, all radical spiritual traditions incorporate this fundamental truth of radiant presence. I mean, or in whatever guise that they put it.
Meister Eckhart, you studied him?
No.
He was a Christian mystic, I think Germany. He spoke more, he referred to God more as a field of being, or something more like that than Father.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, it's all the same. I mean, because it is what it is, and when you see what it is nakedly, it becomes more or less obvious what it is. And then, so there's obviously a lot of different ways you can put that, but the more profoundly you see it, the more different ways of putting it will tend to converge or be resonant with each other. But again, the reality will inevitably transcend any way of putting it, even the most artful. But nonetheless, if you can see the reality, you can see in the more artful ways of putting it, the reality reflected, and see the way in which it corresponds.
I was kind of surprised to hear Jack Kornfield on the radio yesterday. And instead of saying Buddha did this and he talked about the myth of the mustard seed, he was talking about the myth of, he said the myth of Buddha about 5 times. And I think that he's trying to slowly bring out that it was a myth and not an actuality.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty courageous on the radio.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah. Who'd have thought? Well, Jack's getting edgy in his old age.
Myth of Buddha about 5 times he said that. Wow.
But any recounting of anything is a myth, because it's not the event itself.
Right.
Even if you say something that exactly you experienced 1 minute ago is still a myth, because your recounting of it is not the event itself. Just like any description of something is not the thing itself. So inevitably descriptions become mythical. They depart from the actuality, and to the extent to which they depart from it, they are also different and other.
Peter, when you talk about intelligence,
yeah.
So what do you mean by intelligence? Because when I think about it, I think that we have intelligent functioning. We have the mystery appears to be intelligence.
Yeah, intelligence is very slippery to pin down exactly what it is. I think each of us probably has some intuitive idea of what we mean by intelligence. I would, let's see, if I was going to just off the cuff, I would define intelligence as maybe intelligence is the way in which functionality, structure, and meaningfulness are interrelated.
That would be like apparition.
Well, it's not just apparition, but the way apparition seems to work within itself and within other apparition in ways that are both arguably functional and meaningful. Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a very slippery thing to try and define, and ultimately it's undefinable because everything's undefinable, so it's no surprise that we can't define it.
But we call it the inherent intelligence.
Well, I call it the inherent intelligence because that's not because that's clear, but because it's evocative. I think each of us probably has some intuitive sense of what we mean by intelligence. We may feel ourselves to be have a certain intelligence, or we may feel, think we see intelligence in action in various ways and so we have some sense of what that means. And I call it inherent intelligence to point out that intelligence is not something that is being applied from outside. Intelligence is something that is intrinsic to being itself, intrinsic to the full field of actuality. Actuality has a property of being that inherently includes. It has a property of intelligence that inherently includes, which is another way of saying that actuality is astoundingly functional with itself. I mean, you look at the way the universe seems to work, the laws of physics and stuff. I mean, Jesus Christ, talk about a jigsaw puzzle. Yeah, I mean, that to me is an evidence of profound intelligence. And it's intrinsic in being. It's just like that. It is that. It's not being imposed. It just is that way. Or you look at biological structures, look at the incredible intricacy of bodies, of life and life forms interacting, and social systems that interact with life forms. I mean, all of this different structures that appear within the apparatus of actuality that interact with functionally. You know, bodies are nourished by and interact with environments. Bodies are created out of elements, you know, DNA and stuff. I mean, all this stuff is incredible, intricate functionality is inherent in what this is. It just springs that way. Mm-hmm. The oak tree it just springs out of the acorn. Mm-hmm. I mean, that to me is just a sign of pure intelligence, and it's inherent in what the acorn is, and what the acorn is inherent in what matter is, and what matter is inherent in what everything is, what this is. It's all intrinsic. This is intrinsically hyper-functional. Hyper, you know, which I would equate with hyper-intelligence.
So that includes the bum staggering around in the Bowery.
I know, right? What's up with that?
Really?
Try and make sense of that. Well, we humans have an idea of what success or failure looks like, but that doesn't mean it correlates to reality's idea of success or failure. Bums are maybe an example of great success. They're very successful at being bums. Or whatever, right? I mean, how can you know what's supposed to be happening? Humans are very arrogant. We think we know what's supposed to be going on. But, you know, I would argue that exactly what is going on is what's supposed to be going on, because this is what it's doing. Whatever's doing this is doing exactly this, and why have the theory that it's doing it wrong? You know, show me how you're going to do it. Show me how you're going to design life forms and social systems and stuff, you know? Because doing it wrong is only relevant if you know what it's trying to do, and it's pretty obviously absurd to suppose that anyone has an idea of what's the purpose of all this is, where it's going.
Well,
I mean, arguably, life forms and social interaction of life forms grow and develop enormously through conflict. So failure showing up within systems is a profound stimulus to evolution. You know, so you know, things like bums and things like wars and things like, you know, political corruption are actually, you know, fabulous both symptoms of and stimuli of development, you know, of evolution.
Yeah, like Moshe Feldenkrais said, there are no mistakes, because you learn so much. If you do make a mistake, you never do that again.
Exactly, yeah. So the idea that these things shouldn't happen or they're wrong is an absurd theory, and it's an arbitrary theory.
Yeah.
You can just as easily come up with theories that they're exactly right, and in fact even more conflict would be better.
Yeah.
But, you know, not to worry.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that not only
More
does it have,
conflict is on the horizon.
not only does it have an effect on the individual level, but it can apply to small groups or a society or a country.
Sure, anything, on every level.
Yeah.
And on the individual level, you know, in terms of disease, we think of, you know, it's easy, most people think of disease as a failure or problem. Maybe disease is a normal part of metabolism and is actually a good thing. You know, we think of death as the ultimate catastrophe. Maybe death is a great thing. Maybe death is because you don't, you know, unless you know the whole arc of what's going on here, you can't know that death is not good. Maybe death is wonderful. Maybe death is, you know, a necessary and absolutely productive part of the whole shebang, right? You know, I mean, the bottom line is, unless you know everything, you don't know anything. Because partial assertions can be invalidated by something you don't know. So, you know, so I'll listen to arguments from anyone that knows everything, like myself.
From anyone who can debate that.
Yeah, you don't actually have to know everything. You just have to be able to convince people you do, right? Then you can make the big bucks. Very active online tonight?
Jeff is on there, so.
Oh, good. Jeff will keep everyone in line.
You know who else is on there? She had to go. She's in Atlanta time with Sharon, remember?
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. That's kind of nice. Oh, and Bruce Jacques is there. And Stephen Miller.
Peter,
Mm-hmm.
you keep referring to this normal, like it's just normal, like
Mm-hmm.
not anything. But it's like what, everything is. It's so kaleidoscopic.
Yeah.
It's so far from normal. And
But the point is that that's what actual normal is. The normal that's not like that is not real normal. Is bullshit. Is lies. It's fabrication, pretense. Normal is just this unending unresolvability.
yeah, well, okay.
It's a matter of seeing what the real normal is.
Okay.
Even though there's no right and wrong, good way or bad way, there are still artful ways of approaching this.
Yes, absolutely. And artfulness is the index, which is a reflection again of intelligence. You know, artfulness is a way of learning and developing intelligence, because, you know, trial and error. The wonderful thing about spirituality is ultimately you have to approach it through trial and error. You try shit and things don't work, and then you stumble onto something that like clicks for you. You're like, wow, you go, wow, that was cool. What was that? And then it sort of proceeds like that by fits and start of trying all kinds of stuff and having stuff sort of not really come together. And then you get, wow, you see something or discover something. And it's all down to artfulness, really. It's acquiring artfulness, acquiring subtlety, learning to be, to be with this in ever more artful ways. And there's no limit to how artfully you can be with this. There's no limit to the intelligence that is inherently here, and it's available for the exploitation to the degree to which you can stumble on the artful way of exploiting it, or exploring it, whatever, engaging it. It's all about artfulness. It's all about subtlety. And you learn that through engagement, through ongoing playing with it.
Well, I think of that artfulness, and I'm just wondering if everything is a mystery and it's all magical. We can't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. So, how does one become artful in that context?
Well, look at your own history. Look at the ways you are now compared with the ways you were 20 years ago or something, and look at the way you've progressed in subtlety, in nuance, and being able to be with things. And you discover that artfulness has always been, has always been the cutting edge of your exploration, and that continues to be the case inevitably. The answer how to it can't be explicitly put, because you have to stumble on it for yourself. This is all about. It's all about you being you, and you being in your experience and discovering, the possibilities of what can be done there, what's available there. It's no different than learning has ever been. Learning is always essentially subjective, and essentially by, you try stuff and things don't work, but you stumble on things and things click for you, and you get insight, and you go, wow, hey, look at that, such and such kind of works, and then you sort of build on that, and so on and so forth, and you develop artfulness, you develop repertoire, you develop a technique, you develop subtlety. Or not. I think it's impossible not to some degree or other, whether or not you're aware of it consciously.
Well, you've said many times that it shows you, what it's all about. It shows you.
It shows you.
So that's kind of probably
just being with your experience. You learn how to be with your experience. I mean, this is. We all know this. This is what life looks like. When you're kids, you try things very heavy. You take away the toy from your neighbor, and maybe you pull it off, and maybe you get caught, and eventually you learn. You learn how to we learn ways of working things, and you get more and more subtle and more artful, and eventually it's not. If you're not an idiot, it stops being about taking away someone else's toys and starts being about being in a more subtle arena of discovering more subtle value and more profound reward. Although some people never outgrow just taking away each other's toys. But hey, condolences to them.
I was reading this book recently of autobiography by Rodney Dangerfield, of all people. And it's Not Easy Being Me, the name of it.
Predictably, yeah.
And he said his mother rented a room to this gangster, and where they were living in Kew Gardens, I think it's in Long Island somewhere. And so he's about 10 years old, talking to this guy, and he says, "So, are you a gangster?" The guy says, "Yeah." And he said, Could you kill people? Yeah. Would you kill someone? He says, well, depends on the questions they keep asking.
On that note.